The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is Ghostbox Radio with Greg Bakken.
And this is Ghostbox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakken. Thank you very much for joining me. As Patrick said prior to the show, that it is foggy out. I love it, actually. It's my type of weather. It's all foggy and dark, and yeah, I like the sun once in a while, but this is kind of more my jam, to be perfectly honest. Though it was kind of a sad day in some regards, because I brought my truck. It's a 2000 Ford. I have a couple vehicles, but I brought my 2000 Ford Explorer in for an oil change, and was given a terminal prognosis for my vehicle, as things are not going well inside, and it's only a matter of time before my truck passes away. So that's we don't really talk about people passing away. We don't really talk about vehicles passing away, but at the same time, I just it's kind of sad. And of course I don't stop driving it. Like, I drove it out here tonight and stuff, and I think I probably have 5 or so thousand miles left on it or something like that. But it is sad. It's sad to see something that it's taken me all over the country. It's sad to see that that's coming to an end, and it's like, it's nice to have a winter vehicle. Maybe this winter for us Minnesotans, not so bad, but it is actually, normally a pretty horrifying time trying to drive in this weather. So that's the next thing I got to try to figure out. So here we are, and one of the things I find very interesting, and I've always found very interesting, is the Amityville case. I found it to be very frightening. I'm confused because so many people have different takes on what happened there. We don't actually get we do, but we don't get a ton of people who are actually there really commenting on it. It takes us back really from November 13th, 1974, as Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at the home that we all know as the Amityville home. And so in December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into that house. After 28 days, the Lutzes fled the house, claiming to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomena while living there. Now, that sparked a movie, a movie franchise. But Ed and Lorraine Warren, who many of you know, very much groundbreakers in any sort of paranormal investigation in techniques and leading the field, especially from the 50s, onwards. They were brought in for the case, and I've always wanted to know what happened. And our guest tonight, Joe Franke, has been on the program before. We talked about the Warren Legacy Foundation. He had been investigating with the Warrens since 1986. That means that he wasn't there, right? But there's a reason why that he is brought in, because he was given the full download of the case by Ed Warren himself. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about really from a Warren perspective, what happened during that case. And if you have questions, please put it into the comments and we'll get to them. But I really find this very interesting. And Joe, welcome to Ghostbox Radio.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you very much. And I first want to publicly say, before we get into it, that Joe, once again, thank you for being our guest at Ghost Stories and Beyond in January.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
We had to stop because they needed to close the restaurant for the night, but we could have kept talking for some time.
I've been known to talk a little bit. It's
So
just because I'm so passionate about what I do.
absolutely. And, if we don't get through everything or whatever else, we can always bring you back on, but we can also bring you back on to talk about whatever you want to do.
Sure.
But the idea of, what sparked me to want to talk to you about this is, we have long telephone calls, and we just chat and talk. And one of the things that you had mentioned was that there'd be times that Ed Warren would call you up and just ask you what you're up to, and you'd be like, "What?
Mhm.
Not much. What do you need help with?" And he'd bring you down to their house, and he would what would say teach you, right? Some of the cases that they
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, a very good relationship with Ed and Lorraine. I mean, they were just, they're like grandparents to me. I say that just about every time I talk about them because that's how I felt they were. And I know they both loved my wife and I. We were only dating at the time when we met
Mhm.
him, but Ed would call me Saturday or Sunday. Hey, kid, what are you doing? He called me kid. He'd say, hey, kid, what are you up to today? What are you doing? I'm like, oh, nothing, Ed. What do you need? He's like, why don't you come down and, for a couple hours and meet me in my office? Now, his office was a little room right off of the museum at their
Yeah.
home. And he would basically we would sit there and he would let me listen to tapes and watch videotapes. And that's when I first learned of the cases, the iconic cases like Amityville and Annabelle. And I certainly wasn't there. Make that perfectly clear. In
Right.
1975, I was 7 years old. You know,
No
um,
excuse, Joe. No
yeah,
excuse.
no excuse. I talk about this when I lecture, and people are like, "Oh, it's so cool. You're at Amityville." I said, "No, let me just make it clear. I was just a kid then." But um, the case itself, I can only speak to what I was told and what I was taught by the Warrens. I can assure you, it is my firm belief, and everybody's entitled to their opinion and their belief, but it was not a hoax. I know there's a lot of documentaries and TV shows and movies on it, and most of them get it wrong.
Okay.
But in my humble opinion, of
Sure.
course,
Sure.
people can believe whatever they want to believe. I wasn't there, again, but um, so the Warrens used to have classes. I think it was every Monday night from like 7 to 9 at a little place in Newtown, Connecticut called the Hawley Manor. And there's a little back room, not much bigger than a coat closet, really. And I remember with my wife or my girlfriend at the time, and there was probably 4 or 5 other people. And those people I've lost touch with. I don't even know where they are today. I don't even think they're still involved in the work.
Mhm.
But the Warrens would bring in their files and their tape recorders and videotapes. This is long before internet and stuff like that. We're talking 86, 87, 88,
Yeah.
and then into the early 90s. And they would talk about the cases and show whatever video they had and play the audio tapes and the interviews. And it was just really cool. And obviously show a lot of slides, photographs. They had like a slideshow that I've seen, hundreds of times probably through the years. And I was always fascinated. I never got bored of it.
No.
But they also would talk about the things surrounding the case, that some of the things that happened to them while they were traveling home or to the location or at their home. They were affected by this case, beyond being at the property.
Mhm.
And some of the stuff was pretty chilling, even to talk about it today. I've been doing this almost 40 years, and I still get a little chill about this because, this, in my mind, was very real.
And do you think that talking about it is dangerous? I've had that question come up before. We actually had Father Ken Torres on once, and we had a caller.
Padre.
Yeah, and we had a caller come in and saying like, well, if we're talking about this, isn't that dangerous? And we don't think it is. But what do you think on that?
It's a good question. Ed used to say, I remember when he played some of the tapes from the Enfield Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And he started playing the tapes, and he let it go for 30 seconds, maybe a little longer, and he shut it off. He goes, "Okay, that's it, kids." He goes, "We don't want to give it too much recognition."
Right.
I don't feel that there's any danger in talking about it. I mean, I've obviously protect myself. I have to, I protect my family. I've had a lot of things over the years happen to me personally in my own home, but I've always been very protective of my family. But to talk about it, I have to talk about it. That's what I do now. I try to, when I lecture, I'm not just there to tell stories. I'm there to teach people that want to learn, maybe some would-be up-and-coming investigators. And look, I always say, I don't claim to know everything. I don't have all the answers. And there are a lot of good people out there that do the same kind of work I do. I'm not a know-it-all, but I'm still learning.
Absolutely.
But I've been around a while. I've worked on so many cases that I've been personally affected by. And the negative, I'll stop short of saying demonic cases, but the negative cases have affected me physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. You have to be strong in those areas of your life, or you should not be involved in this work. I've seen many people affected to the point where, I've actually said to a good friend of mine one day, I said, I think you should take a break from this work.
Yeah.
It's really affecting not only you, but it's affecting your job, your marriage, your home life with your children. It's affecting your children. This negative stuff, it wants to tear you apart. It wants to break you down, and it's happened to me personally. I'm not impervious to it. Yeah. I don't have a big S on the back of my shirt. I'm just a human being. I'm a mortal.
Well, because you have to have it on the front for it to work. So how did Ed and Lorraine get involved with Amityville?
Well, from my recollection, they were contacted, I believe, by, I think it was Channel 5 news reporter. I think his name was Marvin Scott.
Okay.
Bear with me. I'm going back quite a few years.
Sure.
And they were brought in by this news reporter. And at that point, I think it was just, the tales of what happened to the Lutz family. And I remember them saying that, when they were at the home with other reporters and photographers and a couple of psychics, and along with Lorraine, and they all in a certain way were affected by the home. I remember Lorraine, and there's video of her telling the story many times, where she was trying to go up to the third floor of the home, and near the second floor, third floor, it was up near the sewing room, which was next to Missy's room. So the Lutz had three children, Daniel, Christopher, and Missy. And Missy's room is where it was reported that she would see Jody, the pig.
That's right.
As it was seen. And, it would like sit in a rocking chair, and the rocking chair had been observed rocking back and forth, obviously with no one in it. And right next to that room was the sewing room. And I remember, Lorraine, she said she turned to Marvin Scott and said, I hope this is as close to hell as I ever get. This feeling was so strong. And almost, she says, she was like pushing against her like a wall of water that wouldn't allow her to proceed. And it was very frightening. And almost at the same time, I remember Ed telling me that he had ventured down into the basement, and there was like a makeshift room. It was more of like a storage area, but it was called the Red Room because it was painted red for whatever reason. And I believe that they feel that Ronald DeFeo, who murdered his family, who was accused of it, had been into some kind of satanic worship or black magic or some sort. And the story is that, the dog spoke to him and told him to murder his family. I don't know if that's true, but this is what I've heard through the years. And you and your audience may have heard this.
Oh, yeah.
And Ed I remember him telling me this, because this kind of freaked me out. I mean, I'm brand new. I don't know anything. I'm 18, 19 years old, and he's telling me this stuff. And he said that something overcame him in the basement. He said it was like taking a wet blanket and throwing it over him. And it kind of knocked him to the floor. And he said he could see like millions of pinpricks of lights, and he said, I knew I was in trouble. So I knew something was happening. And he said I remember he reached into his pocket. He said he grabbed his holy water and he made the sign of the cross. And he said this thing lifted off of him, and as he was praying and everything. And I remember he looked at me, and I'll never forget this. He looked at me and goes, Joe, I never touched the stairs. He said, I
wow.
never touched the stairs. I mean, he got the heck out of there as fast as he could. And I remember Ed had said to me a couple of times, he's like, you couldn't pay me enough to go back into that house. That's how terrified they even were.
Oh,
You know, so when you hear Ed, and there's interviews where he said there's some homes where they tell people, walk out, lock the door. It's not even worth it for an exorcist to go in there. You know, somewhere he told me that he felt that house was a portal to hell. That's how bad it was. And they were affected on the way home. They would be talking about the case. I remember there was one instance where their car went off the road. They were almost hit by a truck. And then the truck like disappeared. So it wasn't really there, you know, and their car went off the road and into a ditch, and the car wasn't damaged. They weren't hurt, but you know, just very scary stuff when they would bring up this. This is why I say you're giving it recognition, you're talking about it, and this stuff can follow you. It's not contained to the house.
no.
You know.
Joe, why don't we go ahead and do this? Let's take our first break. When we come back, there's a lot more to talk about here about the Amityville case from the Warrens' perspective, given to us by Mr. Joe Frankie, who I appreciate giving the time tonight. Don't forget, put your questions in the comments. We'll be right back. You're listening to Ghost Box Radio on AM 950.
Magus Books, your multicultural spiritual supply store. Stop in and expand your horizons with books, classes, readings, and supplies at magusbooks.com or in our shop at 1848 Central Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis. From the best incense to beautiful statues, we have supplies and books for your spiritual explorations. Come in and chat with our knowledgeable staff and get what you need for your next adventure, whether you're fighting ghosts or opening your third eye. Check us out today at magusbooks.com.
Greg Bakken here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
Reach your highest level of consciousness and well-being with metamorphosisconnections.com. Metamorphosisconnections.com is an online directory of the best holistic and metaphysical practitioners to help you make your most informed choices. You can search metamorphosisconnections.com for classes, events, wellness and life coaches, plus metaphysical products and shops. You can also search for a wide array of healers from all modalities, including EFT, sound healing, energy healing, light therapy, ancestral healing, shamanic healing, reflexology, past life regressions, hypnotherapy, yoga, and more. And if you're not sure where to start, the search feature on metamorphosisconnections.com is tailored to help both those who know what they are looking for and those who are just starting. Come explore the possibilities for your higher self by visiting metamorphosisconnections.com. Their experienced practitioners can guide both beginners and those that are already on their spiritual journey. That's metamorphosisconnection.com, your link to direct you on your spiritual transformation.
And I don't normally do this, but I saw that John was on here. John, I don't know if you're still listening or not, but I do want to wish you a very happy birthday today. John Marston's a very dear friend of mine. And
happy birthday, John.
You know, I just hope that you had a great day. That's all I want to say on that. We are talking today on Ghost Box Radio with Joe Frankie. We've been talking about the Amityville case that Ed and Lorraine had worked on, had been a part of. I wanted to get kind of from the Warren perspective, a little bit of what was going on there. And if anyone has questions, please put into the chat. Now, I know the answer to this one, Joe. Lynette asked, does anyone live in the Amityville house now? And the answer is yes, to the point that they don't want to acknowledge that there's ever been anything wrong there. They changed to the distinctive windows on the side of the house for the attic. But, you know, one of the things that I think some people have an issue with the case itself, whereas so many people wonder if it's legit or not, because after the Lutz left, that there had been no reports whatsoever of any sort of activity there, anything at all. And it's been a number of years, and I think the people that live there now have lived there for a number of years, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I haven't been monitoring it closely, but I know a few years ago the house was sold and relatively cheaply. I think it was like $850,000. But
I did see that actually.
it's a
Yeah.
very affluent area, and the homes out there are pretty expensive. But yes, people live there, as far as I know, and people have lived there since the incidents with the Lutz family. My explanation to that, and I remember Ed telling me this, was that the family was targeted.
Okay.
You know, it was actually the Lutz family that was targeted for whatever reason. But that happens. You know, you can have two people standing next to each other, and one person will have an experience, and the other will be like, I don't know, you know, nothing happened. That happens with families. You get one person in the family may be targeted, and no one else, you know, experiences anything, and then now they think they're, well, I don't know, she's crazy, I don't see this, or he's crazy. So
Oh, I was just gonna say, because it makes me wonder, you know, because there, in the work that we do, there is synchronicity, and there is no such thing as coincidence, and the thing, is like if we go off of the idea that let's see his name, Ronald DeFeo, if he had the dog talk to him to kill everybody, was that all part of a master plan to target the Lutz?
I don't think so. I don't even know if that's true. This is just hearsay that he said the dog would talk to him. His voice would come out of the dog. Now, is it possible? Yeah, I believe it is, because I have an open mind about everything, the things I've seen. But Ronald, he was a trouble child. He and his father had a blew hot and cold. They had a very tumultuous relationship, from what I understand. His father would, beat him and hit him, and he was the oldest of the children. I think he was like only 21 when all this happened.
Yeah.
So, through the years, the things I've learned, one of the things that's important to note, if you didn't know this, is the Lutzes moved in a little over a year, like 13 months almost exactly, after the murders happened. A lot, from what I understand, a lot of the furniture from the DeFeo family was still in the home. And the Lutz family actually slept in the same beds that the DeFeos were murdered in. Now, obviously, they weren't the box springs. Well, it is, but it was, the bed frames. And from what I understand, there were still bullet holes.
Oh, for God's sake.
And so, in some of them, and that's messed up even for me. I think the first thing I would do is just clean that house. Now, but that's a strange fact, and I've had other people confirm that through the years. Again, like I said, I was a kid; I didn't know, I wasn't there, but I just thought that was really strange. I mean, they obviously got the house for a song. I think they got it for about $80,000.
Yeah.
Even back in the day, that wasn't a lot of money for a house like that on the Amityville Inlet. There, they had a boathouse in the back, but what I do know is this family was terrorized so much so that they spent 28 days in that house, and that was all they could take. And when they left, I remember Ed telling me that when they first met the Lutzes, they wouldn't even meet them at the house. The Lutzes, I think, met them. I don't know. I don't remember if it was down the road at a restaurant or at Kathy's mother's house. I've heard both stories, but the only thing they asked Ed and Lorraine to get for them from the home was the deed to the property, the paper, the house documentation. They left everything. I mean, their clothes, their furniture, their valuables. From what I understand, George Lutz had one or two custom motorcycles, and they had a boat. It was a beautiful home, and they left everything, nothing but the shirts on their back.
Yeah,
I think the kids were in their pajamas when they left.
There's food on the table, wasn't there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm trying to remember, but I know that Kathy had. I remember Lorraine telling me Kathy had expensive cutlery and like pewter, I think, and china from her grandmother, and they didn't want any of it, from what I understand. They just wanted to get as far away as they could, and they moved to California, just about as far away as you can get from New York, and start a new life. But there was a documentary made by Daniel Lutz back in 2012, and Lorraine was featured in that as well, where the one of the original reporters, I think her name was Lisa something or other.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was her name. Forgive me. I don't remember every detail. I'd have to look it up. But Daniel, basically backed up all of this. I mean, he was a child. He's about my age now, I guess. So at that time, he was probably anywhere from 8 to 12, maybe. So old enough to remember this stuff. And the kids, from what I understand, or at least the boys, they didn't like George Lutz at all. George was a big guy, ex-Marine, not afraid of anything. And this family was terrorized, but he backed up, most of what they reported happened really did happen. And he said when they grabbed us and we left in the family van or whatever, with just the clothes on their backs, I think he said that had pajamas on. That's how scared they were. 28 days. I think they moved in on the 18th of December and they left on the 14th of January. But think about that. I mean, you just walk outside your home, get in the car and drive away and never look back. I mean, how terrified you'd have to be.
Well, and the idea too of that damn pig on the rocking chair. I mean, that even just talking about that is giving me the absolute because I forgot about Jody, right? That's the name?
That's the name I understand.
Okay.
The Missy, the daughter, gave it, and there's a now famous picture that you can find online of the little boy peering out of the room.
Dude, I'm just looking at it right now, and you're bringing it up.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, seemingly they seem like glowing eyes, and people are like, oh, that was one of the investigators, or that was one of the cameramen, or look, to me that looks like a little boy. I don't know if it's John DeFeo. You could speculate all day long on that, but the glowing eyes thing, I look closely at it. It almost looks like they're not glowing eyes. It almost looks like they're glasses. Well, if you look closely at it, it's not a very good image. It's a very poor image, but it was taken with obviously back in the 70s.
I'm sorry. That's a boy in that picture. There is no way there's anything else.
Yeah. I mean, this is where I say this all the time. This is where your faith comes in. And faith, to coin a phrase from the movie Miracle on 34th Street, faith is believing in something that common sense tells you not to. Faith is believing in something that's intangible, something you can't, feel or touch. I mean, does air exist? Well, yeah, we breathe it. It keeps us alive, but you can't see it. You can't really touch it. But, that's what I say when I lecture. I'm like, you have to have faith, and the faith is what's going to protect you. People that have, Bibles, holy water, crucifixes, that's nothing just but inanimate objects that have no power. Yep, there's the video. Unless you believe in what those things stand for, and the power that they can possess. But it's the faith behind it that's the power. And that's the way I learned. And I've found that to be very true in my own personal life. But yeah, that's definitely a little boy. People are like, oh, that was one of the reporters, or that was one of the Warrens investigators that went with them. And
yeah,
I don't agree. I don't agree. It looks like there's glowing eyes. Like I said, I look at it very closely, and it almost looks like, because I wear glasses, and it looks like their reflection.
Yeah,
but it's hard to tell.
But I'm pretty sure the photographer said that there was nobody there when he took the picture.
Right. From what I understand, Ed told me that the camera was set up to take a photo every so many seconds or whatever. It was like, again, back in 1975, the technology was there for something like that, but it was, old film cameras, didn't take very, very grainy pictures. It was dark. But I don't believe in my heart that was a staged photograph, or if that was somebody there, because there obviously weren't any children there. No, it's not like somebody said I couldn't find a babysitter, so I brought my kids, with me, and that definitely looks like a child. It's been discussed that may be the spirit of John, the youngest, I believe, the youngest DeFeo boy. And they do look similar, I will say. Yeah, there's the picture.
Yeah, I have them on screen. Yeah.
It looks similar. So but here's one thing I did hear in an interview, a George Lutz interview many years ago, because Kathy and George passed away back in the early 2000s. God bless them. But I heard George Lutz in an interview, and if anybody has heard this, let me know, or if I'm wrong. But he said when he showed that picture to his daughter, Missy, she said, "That's the little boy I play with in my room."
Nope.
Now,
no,
yeah,
thank you.
the room he's peeking out of was Missy's room.
Oh, for God's sake.
And next to it, to the right, I believe was the bathroom, but to the left, out of picture, you can't see it, was the sewing room. And that's the room where Father Pecoraro was told to get out and was slapped across the face.
Come on.
They remember Daniel in his documentary, and if people haven't seen it, it's really pretty good. It's called My Amityville Horror. He said that when the day they were moving in, there was tons and tons of flies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, flies, it's December, but, and so his mother said, get a newspaper and kill as many flies as you can. So he said he was up there killing flies, and he killed like 100 of them. He said he put the rolled up piece of paper down, went downstairs to get his mother. They came upstairs, and there's millions more flies, and all the dead ones are gone. It's like they came back to life. And I think he even said the rolled up newspaper he was using was gone. So really weird things happened. But, the priest came over the day they were moving in to bless the house. And he didn't tell anybody this right away. I think he kept it to himself for quite a while. But Father Pecoraro said that he was slapped. He felt, by unseen force, slapped him across the face and said, "Get out." Now think about that. That happened to anybody out there, what would you do? I tell that my audiences, I said, try to wrap your head around that. If you're in a place and you're not just feel like you're touched or somebody pulled your hair or something. You're actually hit. I was picked up and thrown across the room on a case by an unseen force, which is unmistakable. People are like, well, weren't you scared? Of course I'm scared. You're going to be terrified because you're like, you can't fight something you can't see or touch. It's a frightening experience, but I believe that stuff happened.
Well, yeah.
You wouldn't lie to me.
No, well, of course not. No,
and no reason to lie to me.
And Chuck asked the question as far as documentation, and you may not know this. This is maybe one for I don't know, but as far as documentation, is every occupant accounted for as far as interviews, or have some never spoken about it?
I'm sure. Some people get so scared they never speak of it.
Yeah.
I wish I had access to the Warrens' notes and records to look back. I'm going strictly from memory, folks. Yep. Of the stories as they were passed down to me, and I do remember quite a bit. My long-term memory is pretty good. My short-term memory, not so much. Where are my car keys? I just had them, but I can remember what happened. I was taught 38 years ago. This story I believe to be true, and what was conveyed to me by Ed and Lorraine was fact. What they experienced and what the family experienced. Now, if there was any hoaxing going on, I don't know. I'm not going to say there was. I'm not going to say there wasn't. But again, what was there a ploy to monetize this story? I don't. I think George and Kathy lost their shirts on this. I don't know if they ever really made any money.
Yeah.
Hollywood gets a hold of these stories, like the Conjuring movies. And they, they get their talents and they take so many liberties with these stories, and they make to make it more interesting. And Chris McKinnell, the Warrens' grandson, my good friend, he lives in Brazil, actually. But Chris and I talk about this all the time. Like, if they would just tell the story the way it really happened, it's far more interesting and probably far more terrifying than what Hollywood does to it.
It's interesting you say that, because I say this every time, and I do like the Conjuring films quite a bit, but normally at the end of a Conjuring film, they will play some recordings of the real recordings and during the end credits. And that's frightening. That is very frightening. And I do want to quickly say, Joe, that I think the reporter that you were thinking of is Laura DiDio.
Laura, thank you.
Yeah.
Laura DiDio. I'm sorry, I said Lisa, but I was close.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't think of
Laura, yeah.
I couldn't think of her name either. You know, Joe, while we're at a stopping point here, why don't we go ahead and take our next break? When we come back, we're going to continue this very fascinating conversation about the Amityville case from the perspective of the Warrens, told to us by Joe Frankie. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Ghostbox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakken here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Mavericks Real Roast Beef. Mavericks has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Mavericks Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville.
In the heart of the Northeast, there lies a hidden beast, a dragon's lair at the crossroad, guarded by the maiden Mother Crone. A treasure trove of spells galore, discover incense, books, jewelry, and more. Just as the oracles foretold, this is where your mystery unfolds. As the shadows creep and the veil gets thin, do not fear what lies within. Magus Books is where your journey begins. Visit us at 1848 Central Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis or online at magusbooks.com.
Reach your highest level of consciousness and well-being with MetamorphosisConnections.com. MetamorphosisConnections.com is an online directory of the best holistic and metaphysical practitioners to help you make your most informed choices. You can search MetamorphosisConnections.com for classes, events, wellness and life coaches, plus metaphysical products and shops. You can also search for a wide array of healers from all modalities, including EFT, sound healing, energy healing, light therapy, ancestral healing, shamanic healing, reflexology, past life regressions, hypnotherapy, yoga, and more. And if you're not sure where to start, the search feature on MetamorphosisConnections.com is tailored to help both those who know what they are looking for and those who are just starting. Come explore the possibilities for your higher self by visiting MetamorphosisConnections.com. Their experienced practitioners can guide both beginners and those that are already on their spiritual journey. That's MetamorphosisConnection.com, your link to direct you on your spiritual transformation.
And join me tomorrow on Ghostbox Radio with Greg Bakken. We're going to do one question readings. We're going to have on psychic medium Debbie Straight. Come on in. Put your questions in the comments. Debbie is fantastic, and you can ask her some questions, and she will give you some guidance. It's going to be a great time tomorrow. Please make sure to take the time and do that. And then on Thursday, we're going to replay our episode, and this is one that, Joe, I think you'd be very interested in hearing, actually, the exorcism of Cindy Sauer. And she is a very interesting person, and she is our guest on Thursday. It's a replay, but it's a very serious situation with that. She says that she is past it. I'm not so sure, to be perfectly honest. And then Friday is Casual Friday. We'll be talking about everything we've talked about this week, as well as headlines and everything else. We are in our third segment, and we are continuing our conversation with Joe Frankie. We've been talking about the Amityville horror. We've been talking about it from a Warren perspective. And Joe, this has been very fascinating. The one thing I wanted to ask about is, kind of the repercussions that Ed and Lorraine had received after visiting the house. You had talked about like stuff with the car and what appeared to be near misses. What happened at the house? Anything?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, because I was thinking that during the break. I wanted to tell you guys this. So it was probably the first time Laurel and I were invited back to their home very early on after meeting them. We were invited over, and we're in the kitchen having coffee. So Ed's telling me about some of the about Amityville, and he's telling me about this one story where after they had come home, I'm trying to remember it properly, so I'm accurate. And they're in the kitchen, and to the right, heading towards the living room, to the right, there's a set of stairs that go down into what they call the Halloween room. Ed had what's called a Halloween room. I've kind of got my own here between my ghosts and my lighthouses. This is my little Halloween room. And he said that he heard this sound of like sheet metal rattling, like thunderous sound. And he felt this like wind like they were standing in a wind tunnel. And I remember he said up from down the stairs, he sees this black mass, just this huge black mass coming up the stairs towards him. And I'm standing there and I'm like, my whole body's got goosebumps. I'm standing there listening to this and he says it comes up out of the stairs and I'm like, where did that happen? He's like, right about where you're standing. I kid you not. It's exactly what he said. I said, well, how big was he? He goes, he's almost as tall as the ceiling. So you figure if ceiling's 8 feet, regular ceiling. He's talking about 7-8 feet tall. And, he said, that he made the sign of the cross, commanded it to leave, holy water. And he said it kind of spun around and it disappeared. And he's telling me this like it's a joke. And I'm standing there going, I think we should leave. And there's this is they had incidents like that would happen in their home.
Yeah.
And as years went on, I've had a lot of stuff happen to me in my home, and now I get upset. I'm like, I was on a case once years ago where I had this entity that was here. I could feel it. You could smell it. You could feel it, but I couldn't really see it. And I got so angry. I said, if you touch my children or my wife, I said, I will kill myself and come after you in the afterlife.
Wow.
I actually said that aloud. I'm like, get the bleep out of my home. But Ed taught me, I don't command it. I command it in the name of Jesus Christ.
Sure.
Or based on your faith. I'm Roman Catholic. I was born and raised Roman Catholic, and I was trained by the Warrens, who are very Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
But it works for me. And other styles and religions, work for other people. But this stuff really can happen. These things can follow you, and they can affect you personally. And if they're really negative, evil things, they want to do that. Like I mentioned earlier about my friend, and I'm still concerned about this particular friend of mine because he's still having issues.
Yeah.
Years and years later.
Yeah.
But Ed told me that story, and then he took us down for the first time. We were down in the museum. I had never been in there before, and I'm standing there, and Laurel and I are standing there, and Lorraine yells down to him via a phone call, or she needed him or something. So he looks at us. He goes, "Stay right here. Don't touch anything." Shoving my hands in my pockets, like no problem. Well, he wasn't gone that long, but we're standing there. We're just kind of looking around, and they had a beam that went across the top of the museum there, and tacked to the beam in plastic sleeves were copies of, I believe it was Fate magazine. If you remember that magazine.
Oh yeah, Fate's still around. Yeah.
Is it still around?
Yeah, it's still around. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he had copies of it, and they were like thumbtacked to, and all of a sudden Laura looks at me, she goes, "Look at that." And we look up, and they started swaying like this. Boy. Not just one or two of them, all of them.
Oh boy. And
it started out, and then they started moving, and Ed came back in, and he looks up, he goes, "All right, kids, we got to get out of here. It's not safe." No, he would say that. He's like, he was getting around 9 o'clock at night, and he goes, "If I don't feel it's safe," he goes, "I don't even come in here after 9 o'clock at night." He used to say that, between 9 o'clock at night and like 6 in the morning are like the psychic hours. And that's when things would happen. And 3 o'clock in the morning being like the worst. And if you remember from, the murders happened about that time in the morning. That's why I said I'd like to see the facts, because, a lot of this stuff I'm hearing from the Warrens, but I'm also getting from the many documentaries I've watched and things like that. But 3 o'clock in the morning, as Ed used to teach me, is like the devil's hour. It's like the number 3 is an insult to the Trinity and things like that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I believe that because I've seen so much stuff that support that theory, but he would tell us these things and about the car and, what happened to Father Pecoraro. And of course, the Lutzes, in case no one knew this, the Lutzes were put through a pretty strict polygraph test.
Yeah.
By one of the top polygraph people, and they passed with flying colors. According to them, these tests, they were not lying about their story and about what happened to them. And I believe them. I believe. I may not believe everything I'm told, because you ever tell somebody a story, it goes around the room, it goes through 10 people, and it comes back to you.
Absolutely.
And you're like, well, that's not really how it happened. Everybody puts their little seasoning and flavor on the story, but it's bound to happen if it goes through enough people.
So-
I just want to know the facts, and I believe the Warrens were very factual.
Now a couple things here. You're telling me stuff, and I'm in the station by myself. So thanks for that's great. But also the fact of the matter is, we can't. I know we're talking about Amityville here, but I'd like to talk about the museum a little bit more, if you don't mind. We have about
Sure.
8 minutes left, and it's like, of course, Joe's been in the museum, which is I think a place a lot of us would love to have been in, or to be able to check out, to experience. But two questions for you: when you've been in there, like especially the first time, how did it actually feel to you? And also, would you be there and like hear stuff move around from out, like not in the museum, but you could hear stuff moving around in there or anything?
Well, I've been in that museum many, many times over the years. Matter of fact, there was one time we were at their home for Ed's birthday. I think it was his 60th or 65th birthday party. And another investigator and I asked Ed, can we stay overnight in the museum? And he looks at me and goes, Joe, if I didn't love you, I'd let you. He goes, I really, seriously though, he really didn't feel that it would be safe with all the objects in there. I'm trying to answer your question. I did experience some things in there, but I want to be careful not to think that, okay, maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, because it's psychosomatic. It's like, all right, here's the dinosaur that was involved in the David Galazzo case.
Yeah.
This dinosaur was seen walking and, with no batteries in it, and a voice would come out of it, demonic voice, so to speak. And, here's the shadow doll that was, made out of, there's actually human bones and human teeth in this thing. But, to hear all the stories, of course, every little noise you hear, you're going to think it's something, But Annabelle, I've got many pictures of me. You probably have one taken with Annabelle.
Yeah.
I would not, of course, I would always respect the story and not taunt Annabelle.
Mm-hmm.
Ed, he wouldn't put up with that anyway.
Yeah.
But, Annabelle, I know Ed had told me many times, he's like, Joe, these things are going to stay in this museum. They're not to leave this museum. It's not safe. They're protected here. There's prayers said around them to bind whatever energy is in them. Whether or not there's still energy attached to these things, I don't know. I haven't been in the museum since before Lorraine passed away. And it's not open to the public anymore, unfortunately, because I think the town kind of came down on the family for that, because the house is on a small dead end road, and it just was causing problems with the neighbors. It's unfortunate, but it's an experience that you and many other people tell me all the time, oh, I wish I got to meet them, or I wish I got to see the museum. And I don't know if Tony and Judy allow people private parties to tour the museum. I'm not sure. You have to get a hold of them. It's just, to know some of the artifacts in there and what they've been involved in and where they came from, I wouldn't tempt fate.
No.
I respect it. And it's, when I'm working on cases, whether or not there's a paranormal problem, I always treat the people with respect, as well as any potential spirits that may be there, because people that contact us, I don't feel they're making this stuff up. In their mind, it's very real.
No.
But you have to dig a lot and find out, why do you believe this? Why do you believe you have this? Do you watch these movies or TV shows? Are you into any forms of divination, like Ouija boards, seances, tarot cards? And I lecture about all this stuff, and I teach people, and I say it's all about free will and intention. Okay. And like the Ouija board, because that's one of the most common forms of divination. It's a tool. It's a board game, yes.
Yeah.
But it's the intent that goes into it. And you've got some really iconic cases, like the movie, the case The Exorcist. The movie The Exorcist was based on, started with a Ouija board.
Yes, it did.
I don't know how many people know that.
Yeah.
And I believe the Enfield Poltergeist, the Ouija board, was also involved. The kids used to play with it. So, I was down in Florida last September lecturing at a conference, and I remember there's this nice lady in the front row, and I just finished the presentation, and we were on kind of questions and answers, and she raises her hand, and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she's like, "Well, my 10-year-old grandson has a Ouija board that he plays with. Should he not play with that?" And I just went like this. And I said, "Ma'am, did you hear a word I just said?" I said, "In my opinion, absolutely not." I said, "Buy him Battleship or Hungry Hungry Hippo. He doesn't need to be playing with a Ouija board." Now, that's not to say anyone that's used one is going to have a problem. No. But again, why spin the wheel and take a chance?
You're opening it up. Sure. Yeah.
You're opening doors. Anybody knows the Exorcist, Father Gary Thomas? Lives out in the San Francisco area. Father Gary Thomas is very interesting. If anybody's ever watched any of his lectures, you can see him on YouTube. I've talked to him a few times on the phone years ago. Actually helped me with a case in Vermont remotely. And he said, they call them doorways to the demonic, because there has to be a way in. These things just don't affect you for no reason. There has to be a way where you let them in somehow, whether you did it consciously or unconsciously, but from what I've learned and from my experience, using forms of divination, if you don't really know what you're doing, you can be affected. And that's a doorway. That's a way to let these things in. I said, it's like opening your front door, say, "Hey, come on in." But what are you letting in? I have people say, "Oh, we have fun. It's the spirit of a little girl or a little boy." I'm like, no, it's not. I said, it's something more sinister that's portraying itself as a little boy or a little girl to gain your trust, and you pull on your heartstrings. It's like that's what happened with Annabelle. Yeah. The Annabelle story that started out where the nurses were treating this thing like a real person, buying it jewelry, dresses, putting it at the breakfast table with them, and they're eating breakfast.
If anyone has a chance, there's a book called The Holy Water Incident, which starts the same way, and it's disastrous results, unfortunately. As we're wrapping up here, Joe, because we got to get going here.
I know, Chuck, I get long-winded.
No, you're good. Chuck says no one ever died playing Hungry Hungry Hippos. I don't know if we can verify that. We got the Ghost Box Radio fact checkers on it right now to make sure, but certainly probably not of any sort of demonic means or anything like that. Joe, I'm hoping we can get you on again, and we, just talk about whatever you want to. I love our conversations a lot.
I love to. Like I said, when I do presentations, they're like, "Oh, can you do 30 or 60 minutes?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I usually ask for a couple of hours." Yeah,
no, exactly. Really. Well, maybe sometime we can do a couple-hour show and just get you on. Joe, thank you very much. Really appreciate it tonight.
Oh, I thank you so much. I love being on your show, Greg, and hopefully everyone enjoyed the stories. But
absolutely,
the scary part is these are real, true stories. These aren't just campfire stories. These are real stories.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow with One Question Readings. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.